All right, our number 9 receiver in college football. After doing a group of 5 receiver at number 10, Dalton and Torrey Horton, another group of 5 receiver here at number 9 in Ricky White out of UNLV, who you and I both think is one of the most underrated receivers in college football.
The more I watch him, the more I like him, Max. He was third in the country in yards last year. He was second in the country with 3.83 yards per route run. He's an excellent route runner. He has great hands. He's a deep threat. He had a game-winning fade ball against Vanderbilt that set up a game-winning field goal. It just roasted an SEC corner. I don't care if it is Vandy. It's an SEC corner against a group of 5 team. Ricky White can do a little bit of everything, man. In-breaking routes, out-breaking routes, deep balls, screens. Like, he just does a little bit of everything. And UNLV, he really carried their offense last year, right? Running game was okay. Passing grade, not all that great, but he was the one big-time threat. Even in their bowl game against Kansas, I believe he had 7 catches for 97 yards. He's a vertical threat. He's an intermediate threat. And I think the thing that impresses me most with White is he does a lot of his work, on the outside, right? We have a lot of slot receivers in this top 10, but they're the only receiver more consistently productive last year from a wide alignment was Rome Odunze. White had a 95.5 receiving grade when lined up out wide, and he had the second most yards when lined up out wide behind Odunze. He's just, the more you watch him, the more you like him, and you find like he's just so well-rounded. And if there was a guy from the group of 5 who's going to find himself in the first 2 rounds of next year's draft, I really do think it's Ricky White, because there's not a ton of flaws in his game. It's just everything. You watch everything he does, and it's like, man, it's just clean. He's got a really clean profile. He carried this team all the way to the Mountain West title game where they eventually lost to Boise State, but they could be in line to be in Mountain West contention again, primarily because Ricky White is so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And he, like I said, he was really relied on by the Rebels last year, over almost a 35% target rate last year, which was leading all receivers in college football. So Ricky White was outstanding for the Rebels this past season. Like I said, man, he did basically everything for them. And he was the 3rd most valuable receiver in the country, according to our wins above average metric, when we're trying to kind of look at how valuable players are in college football, like how baseball does with their WAR stat. Like I said, he was number 3 in the country for receivers in that metric. Ran over 22 miles per hour. It was his top speed last year, so really good speed as well. Really good route runner. Overall, man, just an absolutely dominant player for the UNLV Rebels this past season. What are some of the weaknesses, though, Dalton, that you saw from his 2023 tape?
Honestly, there's not a whole lot physically, I don't think, that's missing there. I think a thing for me, and it's something we mentioned with our number 10 guy, and Torrey Horton, I would just like to see his skill set in the formation diversified, right? He's not the biggest guy. He runs around 6'1", right? And you can see there's times where they'll motion him into the slot, but his slot receiving grade was in the mid-70s. He was a lot better on the outside than in the slot. I think if he could become a more movable piece, he could become a more dangerous piece, right? Out-breaking routes and bubble screens and things like that. I think UNLV, and it's probably going to be priority number 1 for them on offense this year, finding different ways now to use them, as opposed to just, when you're always lining up out wide, it can be hard to just always win out wide as the X, and you're lining up running the same tree every single play, right? I mean, you have to be special, like a guy I mentioned before, like Rome Odunze, to be able to do that. Or even, you see all the great receivers now, the Justin Jeffersons, the Devontae Adams, the CeeDee Lambs, they line up all over the place. Stephon Diggs is another one. He got a lot better as he moved around inside and outside. If they can diversify Ricky White's skill set, inside, motion, bubble screens, just make him the centerpiece of the offense all the way around instead of just being that X receiver that you know where he is every play. Guys are talented. They're hard to cover because they're talented. But when they're talented and you don't know where to find them, and schematically you're constantly adjusting things on defense and just trying to find guys before even covering them, it makes it so much more difficult. So I think just in general for me, UNLV's offense just has to come up with more gadgets for him, right? Because I think he's got all the tools, really, honestly, to be picked in the first 2 rounds next year.
Yeah, I think so too, man. I think the one thing for me is that obviously this is a kind of a late breakout for him as a senior. He had 1,500 yards this past year as a senior. The year before at UNLV, 674 yards. 2021, he sat out the year because he transferred in 2020 at Michigan State. He had 223 receiving yards. So I think that's kind of a late breakout for him. And obviously, for college football, it doesn't really matter too much. For when you look at the NFL, you want to see him obviously play a little bit better earlier in his career. Some of the other things, I think he's a good, not great separator right now. I think against, the competition in the Mountain West they got right now at UNLV, it works. But I think once you start projecting to the NFL, that could become more of an issue. So I want to see him get a little bit better as a route runner. He was okay in contested targets this past year. Went 9 for 19, which is about 47% in contested targets. Now, that's not really his game. Likes to win more down the field, but I think that's another way he can get better as well. But overall, man, like you said, it is really hard to find a lot of negatives in his tape besides the fact that he just play, let's say, weaker competition in the Mountain West Conference, because really overall Ricky White was absolutely one of the top receivers in college football and absolutely deserves to be one of our top 10 receivers on this list at number 9.